Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. This is BRN AM for Friday, July 19th, 2024. And our top story today, a life insurance check-in confirming or changing your beneficiaries. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Phillip Snyder is with the Warner Companies. And full disclosure, he's also my father. Dad, so great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
All right. Good morning, Jeff. Happy to be with you as usual.
Yep. Trying to tap into your multiple decades of life insurance knowledge. Let's start. We're talking about a really basic topic today, and that's the beneficiary. And let's back up and let's talk about enrollment in a life insurance plan and life insurance policy. You have to designate a beneficiary.
Well, generally, that's true. You should want to designate a beneficiary. The beneficiary is simply the person who would benefit from the insurance proceeds should death occur. It's
And
Go
and
ahead.
and
Yeah,
does it have to be a person? Can that be an estate? Can it be multiple people?
could be an entity, could be a trust, could be an individual, it could be multiple individuals, it could be a charity. It can be any kind of entity for the most part.
And
Or individual.
yeah, and so with that, why is this important? The bottom line, because you determine a beneficiary not only for your insurance policy, but you're also going to determine a beneficiary for your retirement plan assets, your IRA, any monies that you own that may be bequeathed to somebody else. Why is determining a beneficiary so important?
Well, if we're going to relegate this to insurance, you're buying the insurance expressly for the purpose of providing money at your death, specifically for either an entity or an individual or group of individuals. And so you have to tell the insurance company to whom the proceeds should be paid. Um, in the broader context, excuse me, in the broader context, you want to do the same thing by and large with all of your assets, whatever they may be. You could do that in a will. You could do that in a living trust. You could do that in a testamentary trust. In your will, you could do that in an irrevocable trust created during your lifetime. But the whole point of passing on assets is to whom are the assets going to go? That's the whole point.
And what information do you need at the time of enrollment? I'm assuming that when someone chooses to get life insurance, they go through a battery of tests potentially if they're getting whole life or if they're part of a group plan, maybe they don't necessarily need to go through all that rigmarole. But what information do you need to designate that beneficiary or beneficiaries?
All right, typically you're going to need the name, the tax ID number. For an individual, that would be social security number. For an entity, it would be an employer ID number, a trust ID number, whatever the tax number of the beneficiary is, you'll need that. You'll need their location. Some companies may request, if it's an individual, a date of birth. These are just items that verify the identity of the individual or entity or group of individuals to whom the proceeds will be paid. Pretty
And
straightforward. It's not complicated.
no, but it's important, and clearly, if you're you need to designate someone when you enroll. Do I need to tell? I mean, I guess this is a double-edged sword, right? Do I need to tell the person that I'm designating a beneficiary, or do I keep that close to my vest? I mean, I can kind of see it both ways. I don't want to be knocked off, but if I designate my wife, I don't want her knocking me off. But in all seriousness, do I need to tell them?
I mean, if you're planning, then I would think you want to include the people you're planning to provide for in your conversations to let them know what you're doing. Having said that, there are probably 10 different examples in my experience over the past several years where that wasn't the case, and people were surprised to find that they're the beneficiary of an insurance policy. So, it can work both ways. But in an ideal world, you would tell people if there's insurance to be paid upon death, if they are in fact the beneficiary, you'd like to let them know that.
And just kind of circling back on our conversation about 30 days ago, we talked about finding a life insurance policy. Should you consider, so if you designate someone a beneficiary, should you consider providing them with information about the carrier? So not only saying, hey, Jane Doe, John Doe, you're my beneficiary, but also upon my death, this is who you would need to contact. Is that reasonable?
I mean, in an ideal world, that's what people would do, but people don't always do it the right thing, or they intend to do it and don't get around to it. I had a recent experience where we had a claim payable, and the beneficiary had no idea, and we had to find her and reach out to her and let her know she was the beneficiary of a policy on her mother, as it turned out. So, you know, ideally, people would make lists of things, their assets, their insurance, and so on and so forth, whom to contact, or the name of the insurance carrier, maybe get a contact information, the policy number, type of policy, so on and so forth. And that's readily available when death occurs. And all the attorney, if there's an attorney involved, might have a copy of all that, the CPA, the financial advisor, whomever's involved, the spouse, the whomever is likely to be, let's say, a personal representative, or someone who's going to manage the process of getting all these assets moved over to the right people. Just give them
Yeah.
a list and be done with it. It's pretty simple.
But I understand the other side. I mean, you hear all these, of course, the media always going to print the worst stories, but you always hear about people conniving or working together. I would imagine, to defraud or to get balances, life insurance balances or other balances. I would imagine that's really the exception, not the rule. And the insurance carrier has protocols in place, as does the financial advisor or life insurance broker, protocols in place to validate or verify that someone has a beneficiary.
Well, yeah, I just got an email that a claim that was submitted a couple of weeks back was just paid out yesterday by the carrier to two named beneficiaries. During the process of submitting that, one of the beneficiaries, who happens to be a CPA, found an old policy on the decedent and wanted to know if it was still in force. And we took that information with her authorization, and we went to the carrier and found out that it wasn't. So it would have been better if there had been record as to what happened to that policy. Actually, what happened to that policy, it was values in that policy were transferred over to the new policy that ultimately resulted in claim. So the best thing you can do is keep records. Most people don't keep accurate records or detailed records, so there's always going to be a little bit of hassle, let's call it. Not always, but in many cases, when it comes time to settling a claim.
Yeah. Well, Dad, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about changing your beneficiary, what might prompt that, and a lot more. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the First Lifestyle and Wellness Network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device. Well, Dad, thanks so much for staying with us. Really appreciate you hanging around for segment number 2 this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jeff. Hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, no, I think this is very basic tic-tac-toe type of stuff, but it's stuff that surprisingly a lot of people, including maybe us, don't do, and it's things you need to remember to do. Dad, the beneficiaries that I have on file, if I'm a policy owner, I'm paying my premium, etc., how do I know what my beneficiaries are today? Does this appear on a policy statement? Does it appear online when I log in?
Well, initially, it would be on the application form, or if you had an employer provided benefit, you may file a beneficiary statement with the employer. But having said that, things change. And so the policy, any changes to the beneficiary designation are recorded by the insurance company. Once they're approved by the insurance company, they're recorded. You typically get written confirmation. Typically, the broker who sold the policy or policies gets notification. Now, what people do with those notifications is something else. But in our practice, we put everything into our system. So if a change in the beneficiary designation is made, we keep notes on that in our system, and then we record the change and we photocopy the paper, or not photocopy, we scan in
Yeah.
copies into our system.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really photocopies anymore. They scan. Dad, what would, just all kidding aside, I'm sure people do photocopy. I don't want to get negative feedback from Xerox or any other photocopier companies. Let's talk about what might prompt you to change your beneficiary. What are there certain life events or things that you may want to consider to actually change your beneficiary? I can think of a couple, but I'm sure you have more than a couple.
In general, life happens. Things change, circumstances change. Beneficiaries who were once in favor may not be in favor any longer. Beneficiaries may have predeceased the insured. And so any of probably 100 different reasons could generate a potential change in beneficiary, which brings you to the point that that's why things need to be reviewed periodically. And whatever that period is for people with many assets in dynamic situations, you want to do that pretty frequently. I'd say no less than once a year. But for others, perhaps they own a policy through work. I don't know the need to revisit that every year unless a change occurs.
Right. You get married, you get divorced, you have
Married,
children,
divorced, children,
you have
you
nieces,
change your
nephews, other.
will. Yeah, you create a trust, the business ownership changes. A partner in a business dies, for example, or leaves the business. I mean, there are, unlimited number of possibilities that could generate changes.
When you designate a beneficiary, do you designate a primary beneficiary and then a contingent beneficiary for life insurance? So to kind of handle that issue, like say a beneficiary passes away, you've got the next level. Is that typical with life insurance?
Typically, you would do that, particularly with individual policies payable to individuals. To a business, you probably wouldn't do that. Or if you did it and the business was acquired by someone else, it might be payable to its successors and assigns, things of that nature. But typically, you would name a primary beneficiary, and if that beneficiary predeceases and you haven't made the change with the insurance company, then the contingent beneficiary would become the primary. So again, life is dynamic, things change.
Let's assuming you have a life event. How do you go about changing the beneficiary? Do I call my life insurance broker? Can I log on? I'm assuming it's now a log on type of feature. How do I make that change, knowing that I'm going to get some level of confirmation, whether it's electronic, whether it's mail, whether it's both, whether you're going to get a text message now?
Yeah, well, I think technology helps. You could probably do that online. You can call your broker. You can call the company directly if you want hard copy to do it, and if the company requires hard copy, that's pretty straightforward. It's not hard to do. The thing I would say though is a knowledge. If you're going to make a change, you probably ought to talk to somebody who has knowledge of these types of things before you actually make the change. You have a minor child, and the wife predeceases. The wife was the primary beneficiary, and the child now is the contingent beneficiary. Well, you're not going to pay insurance proceeds to a 3-year-old child, right?
So it goes in a
So,
trust, right, or in
well,
a trust.
perhaps. So the advice would be, yeah, we need to change the beneficiary, but here's some other things that you may want to do before we change the beneficiary. Modify your will, create a trust, whatever. Pick a third party and a guardianship, set that up in advance, things of that nature, so that you head off potential problems downstream.
Yeah. I guess my last question is, let's just talk about filing a death claim. We talked a lot about the beneficiary designation and changing that, but just remind us how you, assuming you know that you're a beneficiary, someone passes away, the policyholder passes away, how do you file that death claim? Or do you file the death claim?
Well, you do. You get the claim form, and as we just mentioned, the form is completed, signed by the beneficiaries in many cases. I just had one that was, the one I just mentioned was payable to 2 of 4 daughters who survived the insured. You get the forms, you beneficiaries complete them. You need an original death certificate from the jurisdiction, the state of Maryland in my case, and you send that in. It's just as simple as that. And then
And
they'll
and
process it. Typically, it turns around pretty quickly, in most cases, and it gets paid out pretty quickly to the beneficiaries.
and just remind us that payment is typically tax free. Is that correct?
It's tax-free, although most companies will credit interest on the proceeds from the date of death to the day of the payout, which will be generally a very small amount of money relative to the proceeds themselves. That would be a taxable item to the recipients. So if you had $100,000 payment and $200 of interest payable, the $200 would be taxable.
Last question. I know I said the last question was the last question, but I get one more. That's right. Yeah, this is what it's like working with my dad. Let's talk about life settlements for a second. That was, I think, an interesting conversation we had about 30 or so days ago. Anything in particular there? So say I go to sell my policy, all the beneficiary information, that's a wash, right? So that just gets, the policy gets sold. It's now owned by somebody else. What happens to the beneficiaries?
Well, during the process, you sell the policy to an institutional buyer typically. I won't mention names, but there are a number of them out there. They buy the policy during the process, the transaction process. The policy ownership will change to the buyer, and the buyer will then name itself as beneficiary.
Got it.
So once the transaction is completed, you've got money, but you don't have the insurance policy. Now, having said that, there are circumstances where you can sell a partial interest in a policy and retain a benefit. Then you're going to have to be a little more creative, a little more careful, and say that the part that I retain as the seller, I didn't sell. I want to name Jeff as my beneficiary. The part that gets sold, I don't have any control over anymore because there's a new owner. So I have no rights in that policy, and the new owner can do what it wants to do.
Well, I mean, this is all information, important information, and there's obviously protocols and procedures you have to follow. But it really sounds like a lot of this is just communication, writing things down, taking note. Dad, we're going to have to leave it there. Always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
All right, Jeff. Thanks. Always my pleasure. Take care of yourself. Bye now.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, then visit our website. Hey, we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN Weekly. Jane King will be here from the NASDAQ to help break down markets in the economy, tell us what's going on, and then we'll take a look back at some of our best segments for the week. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving. Don't forget, roll with the changes.